Hello everyone, it's Oliver G from the Earful Tower podcast here. How are you? How you doing? Everything's alright with me. I'm in lockdown. I'm keeping extremely busy, working mostly on the audiobook for my new memoir, Paris on Air, and I figured for today's bonus little episode, I wanted to share you a taster of that audiobook. It's a chapter that I've just released today, and I think you'll really like it. So without further ado, here comes a little segment from right in the middle of my new book, talking about a story you may have heard before and my first trip to Paris. Hang around at the end for information on how to get the full audiobook. Otherwise, just sit back and enjoy a part of what I'm calling an audio experience. This ain't no audiobook. Let's get into it. Chapter 6.4, Finding Mary. In this chapter, you're going to hear an extra voice. It's my little brother Eddie.
Hi.
The guest star of this chapter. It's a kind of an important one.
I think the most important, for me at least.
So you guys are going to hear his voice throughout reading his own lines, obviously. Anything you want to add before we get started?
No, I'm just really excited to get into it.
All right, well, let's do it. Will you hang around at the end of this little chapter?
I can stick around.
Okay. And are you going to be here while I'm reading the other bits as well?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, feel free.
Do you want laughter through those as well? Or?
If there's a funny bit.
Okay.
Otherwise, zip it.
Okay, can do.
Here we go. 6.4, Finding Mary. I suppose now...
What? Your voice is weak. Keep this in. This is good.
I suppose now is as good a time as any to tell the story of when I first came to Paris. I was in my early 20s and I'd been travelling through Eastern Africa. I was on the tightest of tight budgets and I arrived in London with just £20 in my wallet. The rest of my family got to London at around the same time as I did for a big family reunion a few days down the line, and it was decided that I should take my little brother Eddie to Paris. He'd been learning all about the City of Light at school and was desperate to see it with his own eyes. I was hesitant at first. You see, he was 12 years old at the time, a young 12 by all means, and I was 21. I've no idea why anyone thought it was a good idea to leave Eddie in my hands, but that's what we did. With the Eurostar train far too expensive for our last-minute trip, we booked an overnight bus, packed a change of clothes, and arranged a bus ticket back a day later. All we'd need is to find a place to stay overnight. Before we left, my dad took me aside, gripped me by the arm, and warned me to take good care of my brother.
Oliver, you just remember, Eddie's only small, he's only 12 years old. You make sure you look after your brother.
I'm not even sure. Do you really think I'm not sure that it's a good idea.
Ruth, he's old enough. He's travelled around the world, for God's sake.
I know, but he's a little boy. You make sure that you stay warm and you make sure that he's got plenty to... Do you know, the more I think about this, the more I think it's not a good idea.
Oliver, we're trusting you. Look after your brother, okay? Got it?
Yeah.
Good.
Hold hands.
Yeah, I said. Let's go. We got into Paris on a sunny summer afternoon, and it was like a dream. Now, I don't know what your first ever day in Paris was like, or maybe what it will be like, but ours was glorious and overwhelming at once. We got off the bus from London and hit the ground running. We walked until our feet were too sore to continue. We wanted to take it all in. Eddie, lovable Eddie, was beside himself with excitement, and so was I, drinking it up like a chocolat chaud.
Look!
He said to me as we strolled by the river Seine.
Is that the Eiffel Tower?
Why, yes, Eddie, I believe it is, I said with a smile, and I ruffled his hair.
Boy, oh boy, it's a lot bigger than in my school books. Can we go and see it?
Oh, all in good time, Eddie. First, we need to find a tourism office and sort out a place for tonight. We need to sleep somewhere after all.
Of course, Oliver. You know what's best,
he said, flashing a cherub smile that showed his double dimple. You don't sound very young in this, Eddie.
Do you want me to go younger?
Do 12.
Let me do that again. Of course, Oliver. You know what's best.
No, Eddie.
Too young?
Too young. For the next bit, stick to 12.
Okay.
Now, I was no expert on Paris in those days, but I knew we were near the most beautiful avenue in the world, the Champs-Élysées. And I figured there'd have to be some kind of tourist help there. Plus, I was keen to relax. I was surprised at how daunting the city was. The avenues so grand that it took an hour to walk just down one of them. We crossed the elegant park, the Jardin des Tuileries, and made a beeline towards the Arc de Triomphe. About halfway along, we discovered a little pop-up tourist booth, which looked like it could provide the answer to our questions of accommodation for the night. It was here that I'd meet Mary, a curly-haired, middle-aged French... Will you laugh?
I was just going to say, can I read some?
Yeah, do you want to read some?
Yeah, can I do it? Okay.
Yeah, go on.
It was here that I'd meet Mary, a curly-haired... Oh, maybe you should do it. A curly-haired, middle-aged French woman who didn't seem too impressed with me. I told her that we were looking for a place to stay, and she seemed incredulous. She asked how old Eddie was, and I said 12. She asked if we had a signed document. No, you know what? You are actually a lot better at this. Go on.
Okay, I'm taking over, Eddie. She asked how old Eddie was, and I said 12. She asked if we had a signed document proving I was his guardian, and I said no. She asked why I hadn't booked something ahead, considering it was peak tourist season. I didn't have an answer. Mary didn't look impressed. I saw
I'll
your
be
eyes,
Mary.
Eddie. Yeah, you want to be Mary. Okay, can you do a middle-aged, curly-haired French woman?
Okay. It's the middle of summer. Your brother
It's a woman.
She also didn't sound curly-haired.
Continue.
It's the middle of summer. Your brother is underage. You don't have a signed document from your parents saying that you're his guardian.
Then she shrugged her shoulders and added,
I suggest you find a park bench for the night.
Mary wasn't kidding. It was my first true encounter with a French person, and I'm ashamed to admit that, like many other tourists, I decided that the stereotype was true. French people were rude, after all. We left Mary in the booth and went to sit on a nearby bench. I needed time to think, and I wondered, could we really sleep on this bench? Really? I wondered how my parents would react. My dad's warning played back in my mind, look after your brother. Look after your brother.
Look after your brother.
Yeah, you know him too.
Yeah.
I felt like I'd already let him down. I wondered how Eddie would react. I looked at his little 12-year-old face, his freckled cheeks, his tired and hopeful eyes.
Are we really going to sleep on the bench all?
He asked, using the nickname that only my closest friends and family ever use, especially in times of tenderness or trouble.
I'll do it if you ask me. You know what's best for me after all.
By God, that boy knew how to make me feel guilty. Don't worry, Eddie. I'll figure something out, I said. You just lay down on the bench there and rest those sleepy little eyes. While I waited to see if Eddie would fall asleep, I went through all my options. Now, it might not sound like such a tricky situation to you, but let's get this in perspective here. It was apparently forbidden to stay anywhere with Eddie without the legal consent from my parents, which I wasn't going to get. They were off in Morocco celebrating their wedding anniversary. I couldn't call them. None of us had cell phones. At that time, the internet wasn't even a remote possibility for us or them. I thought about forging something, but then remembered that everything was apparently booked. Everything cheap anyway. I certainly couldn't afford anything expensive. And no, I couldn't whip out a credit card because I didn't have one, and Eddie didn't either. Nowadays it'd be easy, I'm sure, but at that moment, I didn't know what to do. I looked over at Eddie, laying on the green bench, dozing off as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the Arc de Triomphe in the distance. I thought of my parents, and how disappointed they'd be with me for making Eddie sleep on a bench. Night was starting to set in, and there was a rat-like rustle coming from a nearby bush. Several rat-like rustles, in fact. I was astonished to see the first rat, poking its head out of the foliage and apparently sizing up Eddie's ankle, then retreating to wait for nightfall. I don't know what prompted my next act, and it may well have been the rats, but I gave up. I went back to Mary in the booth, and I brought Eddie along with me. Eddie, we have two options, I said as we approached. Option 1, you turn those doe eyes up a notch and we charm this lady into helping us somehow. I don't know what she can do, but she's our only hope.
And what's option 2 all?
He said, his lip quivering. We sleep on the bench and get eaten alive by the Paris street rats.
Say it ain't so.
We went back to the booth, and I went through the options again. And to my dismay, Mary made it sound even harder than she had at first. After I'd all but exhausted my list of questions, I asked the last one I had. Mary, what would you do if you were me? She looked at Eddie, sweet Eddie, with dirt on his cheeks and what appeared to be a tear in his eye. Shall I do Mary here?
Yeah, I'll let you go.
How old is the boy again?
That sounds like my Mary.
This is dramatic. Let's get this right.
How old is the boy again?
The boy is 12, I said, and a young 12 at that. She looked from Eddie to me, and then back to Eddie again. She sighed.
It was a long sigh.
Are we doing line for line?
I like that. It's like an acrostic poem.
Yeah, then there was a long pause. Time stood still.
Well, that would have been my line.
I forgot we were doing it.
It felt like the traffic on the Champs-Élysées disappeared.
It was just me and Eddie and Mary as she decided what to tell us.
It felt like she had the keys to the city, the insight, the context.
Whatever she would say next would be our fate, and I was hoping she wouldn't repeat her line about the park bench.
The sun had set by this point, and I, my beloved little... Oh, it kind of doesn't work.
The sun had set at this point, and Eddie, my beloved little brother, let out a little shiver. I put my arm around him. It felt like it might have been that little shiver that changed everything, creating ripples that radiated despair and hopelessness through the air, reaching Mary and warming up her Parisian heart. Alors, she said, shaking her head. My son is 12. I wouldn't want him sleeping on a bench in Paris. I suppose you two will have to sleep at my house. Come along, I'm closing up anyway. What? Her house? Good Lord, what a gesture. Here I was thinking she had a connection with a hotel or a backpackers and was going to put in a good word for us. We couldn't believe our luck. Mary, who at first had seemed like the most heartless woman in Paris, had transformed into our guardian angel. She locked up the tourist booth and led us through the cobbled roads of the 8th arrondissement. We rode a train to the western suburbs where we spent the night with Mary and her lovely family in their wonderful home overlooking Paris. Her husband was delighted to meet 2 Australians, and we traded stories about our life on respective sides of the world. The 12-year-old French boy gave Eddie some comic books, while I drank wine with the adults. We got a true insight into Parisian family life, maybe better than any I've had in the years that I've lived here since. In the morning, Mary sat down with us and pulled out a map of the city. Now, you've only got 1 day here, so here's how to spend it. She said. She's a little German. Did I mention that?
Yeah, I like that. Mine was too.
She had some formative years in Germany. I didn't write that. That's an extra for the audio experience. So here's how to spend it, she said, marking with a pen the exact routes that we should take and the sights we should see to maximize our time. It was clear that this was her job, and she knew all the secrets. It was the perfect mix of tourist attractions and hidden gems. She told us how to avoid the queues at the Eiffel Tower and the best bateau mouche barge from which to see the city. And as a last surprise, she took us to the local bakery and plied us with pastry treats to take with us, then sent us on our way. It was amazing. We were well fed, well rested, and had the itinerary of an expert to lead us on our way. And so, on that second day, it was even more wonderful than the first. It was like a movie montage with Eddie and I, ducking and diving, smiling and laughing, riding boats and climbing towers, until it was time to head back to London, drunk on the magic of Paris.
Wow.
Do you want to read a bit?
Yeah, give me a go. It was to be my first lesson in Paris know-how. Mary taught me that Paris doesn't have to be daunting and unmanageable. All you need is a few tips, and a place to sleep, of course. Funnily enough, years later, giving tips about Paris and helping tourists ended up being my own job. Well, your own job. I sometimes wonder if I'll pay back the accommodation favor somewhere down the road to another pair of underprepared travelers. As for me and Eddie, when we got back to England, our family sat dumbstruck when we told the story. But my favorite part of it didn't happen for another 10 years.
1 decade later,
That's not my name. You idiot.
1 decade later, Eddie visited me in Paris. We were reminiscing about that fateful weekend, Mary, and the City of Light. We hadn't discussed the story for years, and being in Paris together brought the memories flooding back.
Wouldn't it be amazing to find Mary again?
Eddie said, shaking his head with a smile and wiping croissant crumbs from his chin. This isn't baby Eddie anymore.
No, I had to change my voice. You see what I did there?
I noticed that you changed
I'm
your
an
voice.
actor.
But you're not doing your current voice because you're still a bit younger.
Yeah, I think they'll notice that. I took it back.
Okay. Do you want to do the line again?
I'd love to, actually.
Yeah, go on. I want to see the nuance.
Wouldn't it be amazing to find Mary again?
Eddie said, shaking his head with a smile and wiping croissant crumbs from his chin. That's it. What an idea. Let's do it. I was always on the hunt for a good story, and we had one in our lap. We decided that we had to make it our mission to find Mary, 1 decade on, and to thank her for her hospitality, not to mention for giving us both a story that we'd retold endlessly over the years. And what better way to document the journey than to record it all as a podcast episode? We didn't have her contact details, however, and we spent 4 days retracing our steps, looking for clues, and searching all over the internet for the elusive Mary. I emailed every account that seemed to be tied to her, reached out to her on every social media profile, but to no avail. The French are notoriously private online, Many of my own French friends have fake names on Facebook. Maybe Mary had a fake profile too. We enlisted the help of a beginner tarot card reader and almost hired a private detective until he told us his astronomical fees. It was a cracking ride, and eventually, by looking at old blog entries and photos, we traced the story from the Champs-Élysées to the Paris suburb of Courbevoie, right up to the exact apartment building we'd spent the night. We even rode all the way out there on the scooter, but there was no Mary in sight. The lobby was open, and we scoured the names on the intercom dials, but nothing seemed to match. As a last resort, we stood out on the street and looked to the balcony on the top floor, the balcony that featured in our photographs all those years ago, and we saw an open door. It was our last hope. I asked Eddie to yell out for Mary, to call her name into the Paris skies like a young Australian Romeo, a Hail Mary, if you will. And, just like 10 years before, he looked into my eyes and said,
You know what's best for me, all. I'll do it.
I fed him the lines, and for this audio experience, I'll do it much like it was rather than it is in the book. You ready? Yell out, Mary.
Mary!
It's Oliver and Eddie.
It's Oliver and Eddie!
The two young Australians.
The two young Australians!
That you looked after.
That you looked after!
10 years ago.
10 years ago!
I was 12.
I was 12.
A young 12.
A young 12 at that!
And we're here.
And we're here!
Seeking salvation.
Seeking salvation!
Do you read me, Mary?
Do you read me, Mary?
I love you.
Wait.
I admit I got carried away with the last bit, but it was clear Mary wasn't there. She'd probably long since moved away. We're on a wild goose chase, and while it made for a fun podcast episode, the hunt for Mary ended in failure. Eddie was despondent.
It was.
But I told him that Mary would have been happy anyway. In our search for her, we'd scooted across the whole city, and in a roundabout way, we'd experienced the true Paris. We'd met the locals, passed countless tourist hotspots, and we even dared to cross the Paris ring road to get a taste of suburban life. I released the episode about our journey, and judging by the response, I disappointed a lot of listeners by the fact that we never found Mary. It was disappointing for me too. I'd always hoped to be reconnected with her. Many months later, I got an unexpected email from a woman called Mary. The Mary. Our Mary. She'd checked her old email account, seen my messages, followed the links, and she'd found our podcast episode. She'd listened with her whole family, the same family who'd taken us in a decade earlier. As I read her message to myself, I was terrified that she was going to be unhappy or uncomfortable with being the subject of an episode. But it was rather the opposite. Oh, it was wonderful, she wrote, adding how pleased she was to get her 15 minutes of fame, or as she called it, her fameux quart d'heure de gloire, which I much prefer. We sometimes talk about you two, too, she added. You can't imagine what a delight you were to have around. I'm so happy you came to the tourism office that day and didn't sleep in the wild. She's still German. She's still got a bit of a...
It's not going to change. That's just who she is.
She added that she'd left Paris for a quieter life in the south of France. A life where she didn't feel like she needed to take pity on orphan tourists, no doubt. I've never made it to her corner of France, and she hasn't been back to Paris. But I hope one day to meet Mary once more and to thank her for one of my most memorable nights in Paris. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
What did you think of that?
I liked it.
You enjoyed it?
Yeah. What did you guys think of it?
They can't
No, but you
answer.
leave a pause so they can respond.
Yeah, they can respond out loud on the train.
Exactly.
Um,
Train.
Yeah, people are going to be listening
sorry.
on the train. I've just
I
decided
pictured
that.
them in cars.
Really?
Yeah,
I
like
think-
driving to like an appointment
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah. They might be stopped in their...
at a red light.
No, I was going
Oh.
to say in their garage back home.
Oh yeah.
Just
waiting
like-
for the episode or the
waiting
chapter to
hear what-
finish.
Exactly,
Oh, I
exactly.
love that.
But the chapter's finished, and I figure Eddie and I will just hang around for a quick minute to chat about it, a little behind the scenes, if you will. What was going through your minds as we were reading that?
I was actually thinking mostly about when we recorded the podcast episode and couldn't stop laughing as we did it. And I was
thought
kind
about
of
that
impressed
too.
that we managed to go through this whole thing
That's
without
something
giggling.
I never released that
Oh goodness, it'd be
the
a very
blooper
long
reel.
episode. You should one day.
I hope that everyone's listened to that episode because it's really cool. It's called Finding Mary, way back.
It's not called that anymore.
No, I think I changed the name of it.
Back.
Yeah, what is it called?
It's called My First Time in Paris.
Okay, so this is an episode from years ago. It's probably from 2018, I'd say.
Yeah.
And when Eddie and I were recording the last bit, the bit that we just talked about where it's like, miraculously, we discovered Paris.
true meaning of
the
Paris.
true
Yeah,
meaning
that's
of
what I
our
was thinking
trip.
of it.
And when Eddie and I were recording it, we were
my
dying of
goodness.
laughter.
It took us like an hour.
Yeah.
We were late to wherever we had to go because we couldn't get it done.
And the reason was I added a line in there that was it was a bit about how you were asleep, and I
Yeah.
came in and watched you sleep for a while. And the line was something like, "That night I was watching Eddie sleeping when I realized that we'd seen the true Paris."
Totally. It was when you found the moral of
That's
the
right.
story.
The moral of the story to that podcast took us an hour to do it. And I never script the podcast, so that was a kind of never have since, and that's probably why.
That was really, yeah, it's too. That's why I was wondering. I was like, if we have to stick to a script, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, but I think we did quite
I
well.
think it was good.
But maybe one last reflection from you, Eddie, about first trips to Paris and how important they can be.
Ooh. I would say be prepared, but at the same time, don't.
Yeah.
So kind of be a little prepared.
I think the same thing.
You know what I mean?
It's really nice to come to Paris without...
Sounds stupid, but
Maybe for accommodation you should prepare.
okay. Book a place to stay, but don't book anything else. How about that?
There you go. Good tip.
And I do that everywhere, not just Paris. But am I allowed to talk about other cities?
No, not
Okay.
on this
Well,
audio
then,
experience.
Don't worry. Then.
I thought about something when we were reading it about how you... the bit about how one day I'd smile kindly on travelers who've got nowhere to stay, and I thought how you're staying with me right now.
Yeah.
Karma repaid.
I wonder if... No, that doesn't count. I wonder if I'll ever do it then. How about that?
I hope so.
The other thing I thought about is when you said that we went to the tarot card reader and then we went to the detective and he had
Astronomical.
Yeah, and I was like, if he has astronomical fees, does the tarot reader have astrological fees?
That's really good.
Thanks.
I wish you'd help me write the book. That's enough from Eddie. You might feature later in the book in a wedding scene.
What?
I don't think you
I
have
don't
any
even know
lines.
about this.
I don't know if you have any lines.
I'll add them.
So everyone at home, that's the end of Eddie.
All right, enjoy the rest of the book. But it's not the end of me. You've not seen the last of me.
There you have it, a chat with Eddie, my little brother, reminiscing about a very fun time over 10 years ago when he first came to Paris. If you enjoyed that, now listen, I don't usually do the hard sell. In fact, I very seldom do the hard sell on this podcast. A lot of other podcasts you hear talk about mattresses or website builders, all that kind of boring stuff. I never do it, but this time I'm going to do it for myself. If you like that chapter and you want to hear the rest of the book, I'll sell it to you for 20 euros. Here's what you do. theeiffeltower.com/memoir, select audio experience, and then what'll happen is you'll get a password to a password protected page on my website. You'll put in the password that you've got, and the first 5 chapters will automatically show up. Where are the other 4 chapters? Why, they haven't been recorded yet. What I'm doing is I'm recording it every day in 15-minute segments from my Montmartre apartment where I'm still in confinement. So if you want to check it out daily, that's the other option. You go on patreon.com/theeiffeltower. That's how this show exists, from the generous patronage of the listeners who have become members. So patreon.com/theeiffeltower, $10 a month will get you, I mean, we're talking about unlimited almost. It's almost unlimited at the moment. It would take you a long time to catch up on all those extras. But if you sign up today, you'll hear the 15-minute chunks as I put them up every day at 6 p.m. It's pretty fun. People are commenting on it. I'm adding extra pictures and little behind-the-scenes stories. So that's the other way you get it. You can support someone like me, a Paris creator, or you can just go and buy it outright, theeiffeltower.com/memoir. And that's also where you can get the paperback book too. So 2 other things. If you've listened this far, you're the kind of person I want to be talking to right now. I'm going to be doing my book tour virtually of the US for now, and I've put up a thing on my website of all the cities I'll be stopping at, including this month, Portland, Dallas, LA, Seattle, and Miami. And I've probably forgotten one in there too, but it's all there on the website. Check it out. It's the very top story. If you want to get involved, it's the Seattle one, for example, this Sunday. That's free to join. So I hope to see you there. Otherwise, they're all organized via the Alliance Française language schools. If you want me to do a talk for you, I haven't said this before, but if you're like a group of 10 people in a book club and you think it might help me sell a few books, I'll do a chat with your book club. Just let me know. Let's do this. I'm not going anywhere. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is something I purposely saved for the end because it's rather special and I only want the sort of fans of the show to be listening to this, is by the time I put out another episode, I imagine, or I hope, that the Eiffel Tower will have officially had 1 million downloads. And for me, that is a huge deal. Like, we talk about all these different milestones or, Instagram followers or whatever. Nothing has mattered to me as much as getting this million, and it's a huge deal. Even though I know, Oprah Winfrey could start a podcast tomorrow and get 1 million in the first second, don't care. This is something I've built from scratch, and it means the world to me. But the reason I'm telling you ahead of time is if you're a fan of the show, if you really like the show and you want to be on it, I've been sort of surreptitiously hinting to people to send in a 30-second audio. So you go on voice memo on your phone. I'm not making it easy because I don't want to be flooded with messages. I want to make it the people who really want to do it. So send me in a voice message to my email address, contact@theearfultower.com. And if I had to script it for you, which I obviously don't want to do, but I want it to be, something like this, right? Hey, Oliver, my name's Steve. I live in Minnesota and I listen to your podcast while I'm driving my tractor. My favorite episode was this, and I like that, and I always like this. That kind of thing. And, the more fun, the better. I've had people singing. I've had people sort of having these sound effects and stuff. The more fun, the better, but don't do more than 30 seconds, otherwise the episode will go forever, and then I'm going to release some kind of bonanza celebration episode with a bit of a reflection on the past couple years. So get onto that as well, but for now, the main thing is buy that audiobook for 20 euros, sign up on Patreon, or if you can't do any of those things, why not just spread the word? If you like this show, tell your friends about it and help it grow to the next million. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for listening.